and girls. Uh,
Right.
okay, team, we're just waiting there to get everybody on board, get a few people to come and join us tonight. I'll just turn you guys off so don't panic too much about that. And we've got to try and stream here. There we go. Right. Cross-posting. How the heck do we do that these days? They've made some changes. So we'll try and... We might just have to get those guys to share that, actually. Looks like it's not going to be as easy as I thought it was. Of course it wouldn't. Okay, team, welcome, of course, to the Pits chat for the first of our off-season chats, and we've been very lucky to be invited, actually, to do this interview. They tried to do it themselves and couldn't quite get it done, so I have jumped on board with them and going to interview both Ash and Daniel Cresswell, and of course he is the one of the... whatever he is. We'll talk to him about it very shortly. Lost my words there for a minute. I'm actually trying to figure out how to cross-post. Anybody know how to cross-post? It's been, they've changed everything and I don't know. So welcome to those people that already joined us. I see there's a few of us that's already started piled in, which is a good thing. Great to see us all. Just give me a 5 seconds and see if we can't get these videos across to the truck racing peoples. Okay, so let's see it. And yeah, okay, I can't. We'll have to figure that out for next time. I think we want to get these interviews up and running. So this was obviously a couple of months in the making, this one, I believe. So we're just going to get these guys on very shortly. I'm just going to change my computer. How's this for organised, eh? It always happens when you got your first one, isn't it? And the other thing I've got to do is fire up my iPad, so if any questions come in, obviously. So ideally, this was set up by the guys from New Zealand Truck Racing Association, so it's not a speedway thing. And it's always a pleasure, though, to interview these guys. One of the things I did want to do is actually apologise to a lot of the truck racing fraternity. We did try to go and do some live streaming from there over the course of last season, but our calendar just is absolutely nuts at the moment. And for those people that are in the know, we're booked 2 years in advance at the moment, so it's pretty hard to get away and break away from other stuff that we wanted to be able to do. So we will endeavour, we'll try to get something done this year. We really enjoy it. It's definitely one of the things that we love to do is the old truck racing. It's definitely a unique sort of scenario. And the idea, I'm just going to turn this iPad down because I don't like the sound of my own voice, believe it or not. So one of the things that that is enjoyable about truck racing is just the aggression, the horsepower, the everything about it. And one of the things that they thought would be a good idea is to get one of the main tech officers. That's the words I was looking for, Daniel. I found them. And of course, we've also got Ash that's going to join us as well. Now, Ash it was an ex-racer, and seemingly, if you want to know anything about truck racing, you go and see this man. However, I'd probably believe Daniel more than Ash because, well, Daniel's the man that makes trucks actually allowed to go racing and stuff. So we'll have a bit of a chat to those guys. So let's bring them in. Let's not hold them up too long, and hopefully this is going to work the way we want it to. Hallelujah. We can see 3 people. That's got to be a good thing. Welcome. Of course, we'll start with you, Ash. Welcome to the Pits TV chat, and thanks very much for coming on and joining us tonight. Yeah? No?
No, good to see you, and great to have you on here and doing live stuff again.
Absolutely. And of course, Daniel, thank you very much yourself. I mean, I know you're a busy man. It's been a bit hard trying to get you, sort of here and motivated and stuff, but you're finally here and we got your computer all sorted. So thank God you're a bit tech savvy as well.
Yeah, that was a bit of a Microsoft flaw. I blame Microsoft all day on that one.
Nothing wrong with that, is it? Okay, so Ash, let's just start with you quickly and do a bit of an introduction. So that's just briefly, what is it and what have you done in relation to truck racing? There's a delay with him, obviously.
Well, pretty much ever since as I was a kid, my father helped out with Malcolm Little's team right when he run ERF race truck back in the early 90s and seemingly got stuck with the sport through family endeavours and never really got it out of my system. And I just really needed that feeling of having a go on one myself. And I think I was about 18 years old when I went and got a bank loan and off we went racing for 6 or 7 years. and never really looked back. And I've just been itching so much to try and get back into them actually, and it's one of those things you try your hardest to get into it, and once you go away from it again, all you ever think about is going back again and having another crack at it. That's for sure.
So why did you get out of it initially?
6 or 7 years racing my own truck and. Sorry?
Why did you get out of it initially? What was the reason? You said you were racing and then all of a sudden you weren't.
Oh, I got to a point where I think we finished third in the season overall in the country, and I just thought I could never really compete with those top two guys. And I had a limited budget at the time and really didn't have the experience and the know-how and the knowledge with other chassis stuff and engine stuff to really progress the truck to make it go any further. So I just thought I really wanted to have another go later on in life, knowing full well that I had the potential then to put everything into it. So we've actually, over the last few years, been building a brand new chassis similar to Malcolm Little's 2 chassis that he's just come first and second in the series. And so we've got a good chassis that we know can win now. So he's gone out and won the series a couple of times in a row now. So yeah, we're just trying to really throw everything into it now so I can actually go out there and try and compete at the top of the level with, I guess, all the guys on the front of the row. And I guess the main thing is to try and go out there and win. So yeah, I sold the truck because I couldn't make it go any faster, and every time I did make it go faster, we'd blow the engine up and we'd have all sorts of problems with it. And we were chasing guys that we just knew we were never going to get anywhere near with the budget we had. So yeah, we sold the truck to another guy, and it actually ended up down there in Invercargill with Pricey. And I sold the truck with a really heavy heart kind of thing when I did sell it, because I didn't want to get rid of it, but I just knew it was better to go to somebody else like him, and he put a lot of effort and time into it and money as well. And yeah, Gary had a great time in it for a number of years too. So yeah, unfortunately for me, Gary accepted me into his team, and I helped him out for 4 or 5 years while he raced it as well. So I sort of was fortunate that I still got to see what was happening with the series and got to see what guys were doing with their trucks. And it was good for me because we've started building a new truck. We could sort of pick all the good parts of everyone else's trucks and put that into the new one and try and make the new one go a lot faster as well. So it's worked out well.
I actually see a picture of your truck and behind you, and I do remember when Pricey was been driving around the last few years as well. So remember that truck. It's quite a character of a truck. It's it wasn't the fastest out there, but it certainly annoyed a lot of people with it. That's for sure. He's delayed.
Oh
mate.
yeah, and at the time when I raced, there was probably 4 or 5 of us. Like there was a couple of 2 or 3 guys out the front always. There normally is, and yeah, there was actually quite a battlefield with the 4 or 5 trucks in the midfield, and it was actually probably some of the better racing you'd come across was in that midfield. So I enjoyed every minute of it when I had raced it, and you raced it got against a lot of awesome people that you really put their heart and souls into it too. And a lot of those guys aren't racing now either, fortunately, but their trucks are still out there as well. And the internationals out there now. There's a guy in Ikitahuna, Mark King, he's taken possession of it now, so he's out there having a good go on it too. So it's good to see it's still out there circulating.
Absolutely. And Daniel, let's introduce you. Of course, you are the tech officer for New Zealand Truck Racing Association. So just briefly, your background and how you sort of come to be doing that sort of role.
Unlike Ash, I didn't actually have family who are interested in motorsport. My interest came from watching Bathurst in the mid-'80s as a 10-year-old and taking a liking to what I was seeing on the telly, and that sort of just grew and grew and grew. And my next door neighbour belonged to the local Otago Sports Car Club, and I sort of got involved with a bit of marshalling and what have you. And now, all these years later, I hold many positions within motorsport, including being a steward and a clerk of the course. Been a technical officer for probably just about 20 years, I think. Took the trucks on in 2011 in conjunction with Julian Leach at the time, who was the technical manager for motorsport. And I think he had it because no one else wanted to do it. But I took a bit of a shine to not only the trucks as something new, something I didn't know, but more of a shine to the people within the fraternity.
And I assume that all people keep telling me you're from Dunedin, obviously. So because I see a lot of the people that are saying, "Oh, good on you for coming on and doing this." You're obviously Dunedin based as well. So has that been a bit of a, I suppose, an issue for you? Sort of trying to get up and down the countryside in relation to where these trucks race and stuff.
I've been pretty fortunate this last 10 years to have a real strong 2IC at work, put it that way.
That's always handy, isn't it? All right, now we've got it cross-posting. Sorry about that, team. Now I've got my full focus. So basically what we want to probably try and do tonight is just sort of maybe start with you, Daniel. There's a few questions I've been given to ask you and stuff. And for those people that have never been or have been associated with truck racing, it's probably a good idea to get maybe some idea of what you do, how you do it, why you do it, and maybe even talk about some of the rules and other bits and pieces in relation to the job that you do. Ash, I think you need to make sure he's telling the truth. Is basically going to be what your role is tonight, and we'll have a bit of a chat to you more about your racing and stuff and when you're proposing to come back. But first question I want to ask you, Daniel, is describe what your job as a technical officer entails. What do you actually do?
There are lots of things involved when it comes to this class in particular, so we'll stick to this class. But mainly it's policing the technical regulations that both the New Zealand Super Truck Racing Association and Motorsport New Zealand agree to.
Mm-hmm.
So they may have some technical regulations to performance, like weight, for instance, and we'll agree that that sounds like a viable test and that we'll police it. There'll be other things that they don't get much choice about. For instance, their apparel, what they have to wear. And so, I'll randomly check that. I usually try to check their, make sure they got a few of the drivers don't like wearing the balaclava under the helmet on a hot day. So you'll go and chase that up on the grid on a hot day.
Is that you, Ash?
The balaclava. I guess I also have to attend every meeting that the super trucks go to.
Mm-hmm.
I am listed as their technical officer. So if for any reason I can't make it to a particular meeting, and there'll only been maybe 2, I think, in the last 11 or 12 years I haven't been able to make, there will be a bulletin issued allowing it within the rules that somebody else can look after the trucks and the technical and apply penalties, etc.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like it's pretty good, but who creates the rules for you? So obviously there's some sort of board or association, or who builds the rules for you to enforce?
So the rules as they are today are a bit of a mix from several places. So the FIA, they obviously have super truck rules over in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
There's a European series, there's a British series, there are series all through America, etc. But the FIA is predominantly where some of these rules would have been pinched from. There's been a lot of discussions and correlation with the Australian rules. So the Trans-Tasman can work. In other words, the trucks that might come over from Australia, pretty close to our rules, and means that they can race fairly together. And there was a technical working group established before my time that I guess is responsible for 80 or 90% of the rules that are there today. And we've done some fettling over the last 10 years with another technical working group within the super truck fraternity.
So Ash is telling us that he's building a truck. So do you go and look at, say, like what would they call it, like a green sheeting, I suppose? Do you go and check the progress to make sure that he's compliant with the way he's building his truck, or is that up to him and then he brings it to you for you to look over? How does that work?
Yeah, so not that long ago, you actually had to use a chassis that was existing. So you had to find a chassis from a truck that might have already done 1 million miles or more.
Mm-hmm.
And use that chassis, cut bits off it, add suspension to it, etc., and turn it into a race truck.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's become a little bit more difficult to find particular chassis because, of course, everybody wanted the same chassis, or more and more people wanted to try and find the same chassis, and they became a bit scarce. So we allowed a replication, so local manufacturer of a replication of a known chassis. Mm-hmm. So it's upon the builder to prove that the dimensions are that of a particular truck that more than so many units. I think it's 100. 100 units have been made commercially. So both Malcolm and Ash are copying an old ERF chassis, which Malcolm had some very good drawings of, and were able to put a tape measure across the C-section, across the width, etc., and prove that that chassis was copied from a existing OEM manufacturer.
So Ash, for you, obviously building the truck and stuff, do you build it yourself or do you get somebody else to build it? And if so, how do you find there's a rule book or something that you have to follow? So, like to make sure the specifications are accurate and complete, so to speak? Just wait for him to catch up.
There's a there is a rule book that everyone has to follow, and every truck has to be obviously within that rule book. But I'm a mechanic by trade sort of thing. I'm not an engineer by any means, and like I have had people help do the engineering and a lot of work and that side of things. I can do the engine and transmission and diff and axles and bits and pieces like that. But like I just, in my own mind, when it comes to welding and safety sort of stuff, welding suspension components on and stuff, I would rather a qualified person or somebody with a lot more technical skills when it comes to that to do that stuff. So I know in my mind when I'm out there racing, I know stuff's not going to break, and I know that what I've done isn't going to fall off while I'm racing around. But like I brought a cab that already had a roll cage in it that come off an existing race truck too, so that saved us a lot of time. And originally the idea was to buy that cab to save a lot of time, but that was about 6 years ago I started that process, so it's sort of the time thing hasn't really worked in my favour, and life's got in the way a lot of the time. But we're actually on track now. There's a lot of work getting done to it at the moment, and it's not too far away from hopefully seeing a track possibly at the end of this year with any luck.
So you started building a track a wee while ago, and as I assume that like many motorsports, the sport evolves. So what you started with when you first started building the track versus what you've got now, is it, or what you have to do now, is it too much of a difference, or is it pretty much the same shit, different day, I suppose is the best way to put that?
Yeah, well, luckily for me, like my chassis was an original, like we built my chassis right next door to, I think, Malcolm's first chassis that Alex races possibly. And like he's evolved his chassis a couple of times now because he's built himself a new one, and then he built Ron Salter's truck. So I'm lucky that over the last 6 years, he's actually evolved those chassis a little bit more. And I've managed to catch up and do those evolutions to my one as well before it sees the track. So I have been lucky that I put a little bit of a hold on it. Not that it was my choice, but yeah, it sort of has worked in my favour. So, and like Malcolm's found out other ways of doing bits and pieces that help him get around the track a bit faster too. So we're looking to try and put all of those things into this chassis before it goes on the track too. So we know we've got something that at least chassis-wise can compete with the front guys. We might not quite be there with the power of the engine maybe to start with, but we'll get it as close as we can suspension and chassis-wise before it goes on the track, that's for sure.
Tell me something though, like I'm not sure what you do for a living, so I suppose that's probably the first question I'll ask. What do you actually do for a job? Well, mechanic is what you're going to say, I'm sure.
I did have a truck workshop a couple of years ago. I operated that for a few years and on-sold that, and now I've just basically been contracting, helping out a lot of local guys doing bits and pieces on their vehicles, still doing truck maintenance and a bit of transporting and just whatever the day brings on the day, really.
So has it been easy for you? Is that the reason why it's taken so long? Is because like you're not a business owner, you can't write some of the build off, I suppose, with your business and through sponsorship or advertising and stuff like that. So I suppose it's a lot harder because you're just a wage earner and you've still got to live, don't you?
Well, yeah, originally I was just a wage earner, yeah, and then I started to build the truck while on wages still, and then I started a truck workshop in Masterton here, and yeah, that sort of got in the way, and that took up 3 years of my life, running a workshop and doing bits and pieces there, and had another guy that brought into it, and he did really well with stuff, and he's taken it over now, and he's going pretty good with it. But yeah, life in general just gets in the way sometimes, and it's one of those things when you're definitely building something from scratch, you have to devote your whole life to it to see it through, because it is a big job. There's man hours that go into these things to try and get them on the track, and like I'm certainly not by any means rich, and it's a lot of work has to be done yourself, and it's not some of those things like I'd love to go out and just drop the truck off at an engineer's and just leave it with them and come back in a year's time with a fully going truck ready to go, but yeah, and like
realistically.
your circumstances, I have to do a lot of it myself. So,
Yeah.
like, good on the guys that can do that sort of stuff because they've got busy lives as well. So that's more convenient for them to do that. But yeah, unfortunately, I've got to do a lot of stuff myself, and yeah, I just haven't had the time in the last couple of years. But things have settled down now, and yeah, it's time to get into it and get it finished.
Daniel, have you raced? Have you raced at all? I might have missed that question. Did it?
Yeah. No, I did a bit of racing. Just I've done the Dunedin Street Race, for instance, a couple of times. Hill climbs and rallies, and just all the local motorsport. I haven't done anything. I've been around a circuit a couple of times. Done a club captain's event at Levels a few years ago, which was quite fun. Done a few autocrosses down in Teretonga. I haven't actually been in a circuit race in Teretonga, but yeah, just a fluttering of club sport and rally and you name it.
So I suppose, have you always worked with the super trucks, or has there been other classes that you've been associated with along your journey?
Yeah, I actually had to make a bit of a list because there's quite a few.
Here we go.
I didn't make a list.
Grab a beer, mate, Ash. He'd be a war.
I worked with NZV8s for a couple of years, maybe 3 years. NZ Super 6, which was quite fun. TR86. I actually TO'd in the very first round of that in Highlands many years ago. NZRC, I've sort of done a lot of scrutineering and TOing with NZRC and even our local rally scene, probably more than any other sport actually. I've been involved with them since the 90s, showing my age. And obviously club sport, which is hill climbs and rally sprints, local events. Even had a blast of Formula Ford for a few meetings.
So you get around.
Get around a bit.
Fair enough.
I actually had a small amount to do with off-roading New Zealand and Oamaru for a couple of years. Sort of helped out there for a bit. And there's the old, crewing at Speedway, some Speedway stuff.
Oh, yeah, tell me about that. Now we're talking. Who'd you crew for?
It's just a different. It's just a different type of sport, isn't it?
So, it is, yeah. So who did you crew for on Speedway?
Oh, this is many years ago.
That many years ago, he's forgotten.
Yeah, I actually have forgotten.
That happens, eh? Anyway, we better not, because the focus is not Speedway, and the powers that be will growl me if I carry on with that. Just a couple of questions here. What safety gear is required for these guys, like when they get into the truck racing aspect of it? Tell us what they need.
So their apparel is in the high end, so they're a championship. So the rules, we have our safety schedule. So the motorsport manual was made up of several different schedules. There is a race schedule, a rally sprint, etc. The one, and there's a a schedule TR, which is your truck racing schedule. The safety schedule, though, we call that Schedule A, and that lists out all the different types of helmets that we approve, the different types of overalls that we approve, your boots, your gloves, even underwear, balaclava, extinguishers, harnesses, seats. It's all listed in there, what standard they need to be up to, what age they can be, how they're bolted down. It's reasonably detailed. All that is listed in Schedule A. And as the trucks are championship, there is a special column that lists out what the trucks actually what standard they have to meet. So it's pretty much all FIA. They expect them to be running all the FIA gear. And with that, the more money you spend, the better it fits, the cooler it is, etc. Some of the guys do run cool suits within their gear because they are wearing 3 or 4 layers. Obviously, on a good sunny Invercargill day, you'll be degrees down there, and yeah, the gentlemen are feeling it.
I bet.
Their things like extinguishers run the same rules as a car. So even though these trucks are 5 or 6 ton, they could be 4 or 5 times heavier than a race car. They still run the 1 kilo extinguisher. It's only to sort of help them, I guess, get out of the truck. And if there is a bit of a problem, remembering that there are safety points at multiple places around the circuit that carry, more significant fire gear.
When you set up your truck, Ash, I suppose safety would have to be pretty paramount, in what you're building and stuff, and your safety gear would have to be factored into it. I mean, it's all cool to build a really cool truck, but that safety aspect of it, that'd be one of the things you'd be pretty high on when you're building a truck, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And like I say, the roll cages are twice the size or 3 times the size of normal car stuff, and like because of the extra weight of them, like there's been a couple of accidents over the years too that's actually brought improvements to the safety stuff. Like there was an accident some years ago at Manfield with a Porter's race truck, and since that they had a roof plate in their roof, and after that accident it made out that that roof plate actually did a lot to saving his life, and how it sort of crumpled the roll cage around it and that. So they made it a rule for all the trucks then to go put a roof plate in them, and just bits and pieces like that. So safety is always at the back of your mind for sure, and being comfortable, like you say, you've got to build the truck and the seating position around being comfortable as well, because if you're uncomfortable, you're not focused on what you're doing. So it takes a lot to be pretty focused and get around the tracks pretty safely at the same time. So safety is always at the back of your mind, and if it's not, you should really be making it a concern of yours if safety's not at the top of your list. And
I haven't seen or heard of many incidents or serious incidents involving truck racing. I think there was one down here at Tiratonga that somebody told me about when I was doing an interview there a wee while ago. And although there was a bit of a mess, everybody sort of come out of it okay-ish, so to speak. So I suppose, at the end of the day, the sport's in good stead. It's probably a good sport to get into, the old truck racing, because it is fairly... I suppose, safe as it can be, considering the size of the bloody monsters you're driving. Ash.
Yeah, and I think worldwide possibly too. I don't think anyone's actually perished in a race truck sort of thing in an accident of any sort to do with race trucks. Like, it unfortunately happens in some motorsports. Accidents sort of like that do happen and people perish, but I think even worldwide at this stage, no one's actually died in a race truck, and that's why they have their 160k speed limit on them and just stuff like that, and safety is a big area of that sort of thing. Like it's not it's certainly not an unsafe sport. It is very safe, and the guys out there respect each other enough to not do silly things. And you see some speedway videos where guys will be chasing people around after in the pits, fucking bashing into each other and stuff like that on the track in their cars. But that sort of stuff doesn't happen. They are a big weapon, really, if you put it in the wrong hands, kind of thing. So. Yeah, the people have to have a bit of respect in them when they're in them, and they do all respect each other enough to not do stupid things. Like accidents, unfortunate accidents do happen, like the one in Tiratonga. That was a freak accident kind of thing, and it unfolded pretty quickly for a few people that happened to. So, yeah, it was a sort of a one-off, and they don't have many accidents like that. Like, I think in the nearly 30 years of truck racing being in New Zealand, there's only been probably a handful of guys actually tip them on their sides or go upside down in them and stuff like that. So, yeah, they are very, very safe when it comes to that sort of stuff, and they've got the rules and regulations around keeping them safe as well to stop anything like that from happening.
Next question for you, Daniel. How heavy are the trucks? I mean, is there a minimum or a maximum weight that you have in truck racing?
Yeah, there are currently 3 classes. I've only ever seen 2 of those classes raced in all the time I've been involved. So sticking with them. Class A is 5,500 kilos minimum weight, and that's with an unlimited engine size. And then Class B is an engine size up to 11,950 cc's, and their minimum weight is 5,000 kilos.
Okay.
Some of the trucks are getting up around 6,000 kilos. So there are some fatties out there. And there are some that are right down towards the minimum, within 100 kgs or so.
So do you weigh them? You got scales and stuff that when you're at the track, you weigh them with?
Yeah, not as often as I'd like. It sort of comes down to the cost of it, because you can't just go using a set of car scales.
No.
These are big boys.
Yeah. I bet. How do you like? I always hear that these trucks are governed or regulated to 160 kilometres an hour. How do they actually implement that? What does all that, Daniel?
Yeah. So most of the trucks do have governors that can be accurate. Some of them are more accurate than others. You know, there are guys out there that can dial up half a kilometre an hour, and you wonder how they do that with all that horsepower. But that's their problem. My side of it is measuring it, and we measure it very accurately using Race Logic GPS race box or drift box. They go under a couple of names, but they essentially do the same thing. And that gives me some data that we gather at the end of a session, and I make that my focus, my main job, to gather all that data, process it, make sure nobody's speeding. If they are speeding, obviously we write them up. And there's never an excuse. You know, well, there are some offered, but there is never an excuse that works. You know, it's a pretty black and white rule. We have modified that rule over the years, because as the trucks got more and more powerful, they were sort of bumping over just for a split second, and then they were settling on, say, 158 or 159, so well under. But the little wee surge became a bit of a problem for some of the some of the more powerful guys. And we actually allow a small buffer for a short amount of time, and the equipment that we're using is so accurate, I'm actually able to measure that buffer. So, you know, so they might you're allowed to go over 160 for no longer than 2 seconds and then drop back again. So within 2 seconds, they might climb 1 or 2 kilometres an hour and then get back below the 160 mark again.
Now, just before I ask you, Ash, about the same question, because you'll know how they regulate them or how they govern them anyway, or whether it's mechanical or electronic or whatever, just remember, folks, if you do want to ask questions, get onto the Pits Media Facebook page and just ask your questions. And towards the end of the interview, we will ask these guys these questions. I see there's a couple that have come up, so just encourage you guys, if you want to come in and join the conversation, just write your question in there. I'll see it. I unfortunately can't see it on the New Zealand Truck Racing Association Facebook page, so you might just need to jump over and or get somebody that you know that's watching it on both or whatever to ask the question on your behalf. I'm going to ask you, Ash, how do you govern the 160k? So you know that 2 second buffer you've got. How do you stop it from being 3 seconds?
Well, the majority of the trucks like now are all electronic engines, so they're all electronically controlled fuel injectors and that sort of stuff. So they're all done through the ECU programs, and majority of them are done either just by restricting the rev limit, like the rev limiter of the engine and the gearing and the gears and the diff ratios and stuff like that. So they can easily sort of set them up. And like Daniel said, some of them can change it by half a kilometre. Some of them are regulated through the actual transmission speed and stuff like that. Like there is a couple of ways with the electronic guys to do it. Like my old International in the background, that's got a 14-litre Cummins motor in it, mechanical engine with a PT like fuel system on it, Cummins own fuel system, and that was regulated just purely mechanically by adding shims or taking shims out of the fuel pump and limiting the revs on the engine. So you'd have to get the right gear ratio and the diff and stuff like that, and you just work it out by not over-revving the engine. And we've got that, I think, to the point where Daniel can come along and say it is actually consistent all the time. There's never actually any problem with it. It does about 159 all day long. Doesn't go over, doesn't go under. And because it's all mechanical, it can't actually go either way. Maybe if you get a Invercargill and a southerly coming from the Antarctic, you might go a couple of K faster with a back wind maybe, but never really had that problem. But yeah, all the most of the trucks now are all electronically injected, so they're all done via the ECM on the engine or transmission.
Just a couple of
yep.
We have a couple of sessions where they're allowed to test, so they don't get penalised if they go over, and there is a penalty if you go silly. So you hit 170, you're out for the weekend.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
No mucking around.
No mucking around.
Yeah.
So there's testing and there's being silly. So, but with testing, obviously I'm giving feedback all the time. So track to track. Obviously we got the hill at Pukekohe. They come up over the brow. Some trucks do have a bit of a problem there, so they'll do some tweaking and fettling.
Cool. So if it's just a little bit over, like say they go for 3 seconds at 160 kilometres an hour or more, what's the deal there? What sort of penalty do they get from that?
So that they're predominantly time penalties. The first one is 10 seconds added to your race time. Somebody has still won the race with that penalty applied at Ruapuna a few years ago. So they were aware that they sped, and they were like, oh man, we got to get the guy out of here. So that driver managed to actually get ahead 10 seconds and keep his win.
Get the buffer.
Just on a segue. But 10 seconds, which can quite often put you back 2, 3, 4 places. You get caught longer than that or do it again, it's another 10 or it's another 20 if you do it for 5 seconds or more. And that penalty has been dished out as well. So
I think like I've been watching a wee bit of truck racing, obviously, since I've been more involved with it through Christine and, Anderson and daughter and stuff. And one thing I did notice with trucks, it's a pretty simple sort of a deal, really, isn't it? It's to get the big pile of whatever it is to 160 kilometres an hour the quickest, but also making sure you can get it around the corner as well, isn't it? That's really all that truck racing is, isn't it?
These trucks in New Zealand would be the fastest trucks in the world, and I'm pretty positive about that. The way that they get to 160 kilometres an hour will blow anybody's mind that's involved in motorsport. They are so fast.
Some of those trucks are a work of art too, aren't they? I mean, some nice trucks out there.
I think I measured someone doing from 60 to 160 in 6 seconds.
Unbelievable. What's yours do, Ash? 5 seconds?
Oh, it'll do 5 seconds easy, yeah.
he says hoping like hell. It's just amazing, isn't it? And I suppose you've said you're building a truck, but you didn't tell us what engine you're putting in it. So is yours going to be a super grunty one, or there seems to be a couple of main ones, isn't there?
Yeah, I think I settled on an engine a few years ago. I managed to get enough bits together to build a Series 60 engine. So it's a Detroit electronic engine. Like Dave West, he runs one in his Argosy. He was the first one in New Zealand to put one in his race truck, actually. It's a couple of guys in Aussie that run them, and just the success that they had with them over there and the reliability that they had with them, it sort of settled for me. Like I thought, oh, that's an engine that I want to have in my truck now. And originally, when I first got my truck, it had an old V6 Detroit 2-stroke engine in it, and just like that was a cool engine. They sound cool. They've got their own identity, those 2-stroke engines. But since then, I've just sort of I've been a fan of the Detroit engines for forever, and I thought, oh, next engine I want to put in a race truck will be a Series 60, and we're fortunate enough now that the last few years we've got together the program for the ECU, and I've got some injectors away in Melbourne at the moment, getting some work done to them and bits and pieces, and maybe to start with, it might not be the exact engine that I want to have in there, but I've got a spare one as well, so regardless, time might be the biggest thing at this stage. Like if we get closer to the start of the season and the truck is almost ready, the engine that's in the truck at the moment will probably stay in it, and it'll get the fast bits chucked on it, and we'll see how long it goes till I can get the other engine up and going and swapped over, sort of thing. But yeah, we've built an engine, and I've got parts there to build an under 12 litre engine sort of thing. But it'll be around sort of the low 11 litre engine. So hopefully we can be in that B class, keep it that lighter weight. But depending on what happens with rules and bits and pieces like that, we'll see. Obviously, if rules change or what, in the meantime, we can keep the bigger engine in there and not have to worry about it. But obviously, looking at the different classes, it's probably not too much in it now. Like we just saw the first and second in the series. One was the first one; it was a B class. Second place was an A class, and over the series they were sort of actually quite similar in times. I think they were getting down to being about 0.2 of a second between each other, the fast truck and the heavier truck and the lighter truck. So yeah, if the trucks are built sort of similar spec kind of thing, they're actually pretty close in times. And that's the whole point, I guess. At one point, once people started using those C12 engines and realised they could get really good horsepower out of them and keeping that B class and be 500 kgs lighter, they had an advantage for a long time. But I think that advantage is really narrowed up now, and there's probably not too much in it.
Somebody did ask a question. I think it was Peyton Kempton. She says, "When are you going to start racing again, Ash?" Just quickly, whilst we were talking about that truck, when are you actually going to be back out again?
Wow. Hopefully for the first of this season, but if it's not the first of the season, we'll definitely get to one of the rounds this year in that truck, that's for sure.
It was good to see the Australian guy come over last season as well. How did he go? We'll leave that alone.
Stephen did really well, actually. I think they were hoping to. He came out 10 years ago and won the class, and like Daniel said, in the last 10 years, the trucks in New Zealand have progressed like phenomenally, and they are a lot faster than what they were. And I think Stephen maybe got a little bit of a shock when he come back after 10 years of realising how fast and how a lot further forward some of the trucks here in New Zealand are. So, like he still did really well. Like I think they had limited time from their season ending in Australia to getting the truck on a boat, getting it over here.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of touch and go. It wasn't going to make Manfield. It was still sitting in the Tauranga Harbour at one point on the Thursday afternoon, and it wasn't even anywhere near the Manfield circuit. And yeah, they turned up and they did as best as they could with what they had. And yeah, they were struggling for limited time, and they couldn't do too much to that truck between sending it from Aussie to here. And they had a few issues while they were here. They blew a couple of engines up.
What was that, Daniel? Sorry?
That mechanical engine, I think, was really the struggle.
Mm. Logistically, it was a bit of a. I think the whole deal was for him. I mean, it was really, really good that he came over. That's Steve Zimmerman, wasn't it? Is that his name? By memory, yeah, Zimmerman.
Yeah, commenting on the page, yeah.
Yeah, no, he's and full kudos goes to him. I wasn't being cheeky in relation to where did he get, because I was actually quite interested, because I do remember him being quite involved in the interviews we did last season, and he was, said, "Up, I'm coming," and it's good to see. I suppose it's a good feeling to know that even some of the better Australian drivers come over, and us Kiwis are actually very competitive.
Yeah, he's a great peddler. Stephen's a great peddler.
Okay, so Ash, I'm going to ask you, and Daniel, I'll start with you, Ash, though. What's your most memorable moment in the sport you've been involved with? What's the one that's really stood out for you?
Wow, I don't know. Recently, probably the most memorable thing was actually being in the commentator's box for the very ever last race that they had at Pukekohe with Clint Brown. Like, it wasn't actually me being on track, but getting to watch everyone else on track. But just the fact that that was the last ever race to be held at Pukekohe, like I thought, it's something to put on the CV that you can probably never ever have again, because the track's now shutting down. So, like, I thought, yeah, that race wise, apart from that, finishing third in the series back in I think 2011, it was probably the best achievement as such. And the most memorable moment of all was probably just the closeness of the racing that I've had with a couple of the guys, especially like Ken Rowe. He used to race the Eagle Spears Kenworth of Porters, and like me and him used to go toe to toe and never touch each other, as minimal as possible. And I had some really close racing with Ken, and I really enjoyed the racing we had with Ken. So that's probably one of the best things I've had with the truck racing so far.
Cool. What about you, Daniel?
A couple of moments. I mean, it's all memorable. They're not always necessarily positive, are they? But
no.
So one that came to mind was Dave's accident in Invercargill. I actually had my young kids at that meeting, and his bull bar managed to get ripped off the front of the chassis, and it went swinging over my head, probably a good 10 metres above my head, in an arc that landed behind me, probably about 10 metres, exactly where my kids were, in that area. So there were a few people there, and that bar managed to land in the middle of all this hustle and bustle of cars and people, and not touch a single soul. So that was sort of one.
That's a good one.
Yeah, definitely. And on a good note, hopping in beside Stephen Zammit back in, I think it might have been like 2012, and going around levels, getting a real seat of the pants feel of what these trucks are all about, and that just sort of changes your outlook a little bit. You should give it a go one day, Jason.
Somebody said, actually, now I'm going to revert back to Speedway, because I actually had the opportunity to drive a top super stock a couple of weekends ago in Christchurch, and they said, somebody should give me the keys to your truck when it's ready, Ash. Keen?
Oh, mate, feel free. The more people that get involved and have a go on that stuff, the more it gives the people the rush of wanting to get their own one. So, like, if it wasn't for me, luckily enough, as a kid, being allowed to drive Malcolm Little's ones around the pits and stuff like that, all it takes is one person to have a little go like that, and all of a sudden you've got the bug. So the more people that want to jump in it, the better. I'm happy to let people go have a go in it.
I did get the
Under
opportunity
the right
to.
circumstances, that is.
I did get the opportunity to go for a drive with Pricey, but there's a limit to how alive I want to be, and jumping with Pricey wasn't the ideal scenario. This is towards the end of his career. I'll leave that with you guys. Let's talk about scrutineering. Daniel, what does scrutineering involve? Tell us, if I was to go and buy a truck and I needed, everything was all good to go, what do I need to do, and what do you do to make sure I'm good to go?
Turn up with your logbook, for one.
Yep.
Make sure all your apparel with you, so it's helmet and overalls. And I'll have a random set of criteria that I'll check. So usually I get to check the trucks reasonably thoroughly twice a season.
Mm-hmm.
That's based on them having 4 meetings. So we'll check them at the first one and then any of the next 3, not necessarily the last one. And we might check things like bumper heights, making sure the bumper's at the correct height. I mean, obviously that's pretty critical if these with these buggers are always touching each other. We might check wheel nut covers, or we might check the security of the seats. So there's not only the safety side of things, but also the eligibility side of things. So making sure they're not too light, making sure they're not running 3 turbos. They're allowed to run 2, but not 3.
Mm-hmm.
All those sorts of things.
It's So you don't actually scrutineer them every meeting, or you do?
No, so we run an audit process. So they have a logbook.
Mm-hmm.
They sign an entry form, which states very specifically that their truck is up to spec and they're not cheating.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll audit that occasionally. So the minimum is they have to be audited once every 6 months or every 3rd meeting.
Okay. So, do you have I know, in Speedway they have a green sheeting process at the start of every season. Do you guys have a similar thing? Do you guys actually go out and check the trucks before they go out, or is that up to the driver to ensure that they're compliant?
It is up to the driver to ensure they're compliant, and it always has been in motorsport. It's always up to the driver. We will just audit that process to make sure that they're doing what they say they're doing.
So when you say audit, and I know the word what audit means, but say for example, if somebody doesn't have a correct size engine, or somebody is there, how involved do you guys get if somebody's not actually, so say somebody says, that guy's cheating because he's going too fast, or whatever the story may be, what's the process? How does that all happen, and how do you do that?
It is a little bit complicated, and because of that complication, and it's a recent hot topic, within the last couple of seasons, what's easier to do is to get the engine sealed
yeah.
After getting checked at the point before the head goes on. And more owners are doing that. So while the head's off, they'll get, it doesn't have to be me. It can be a local technical officer. There are maybe 20 around the country.
Okay.
So someone with a bit of know-how can go there, measure the engine, and declare it to be a Class B engine or a Class A engine. Okay. They'll have seals with them. You only need to put a seal between the sump and the cylinder block, and then that becomes impossible to change the capacity of the engine.
Okay. Well, that's a good answer.
Yep. And then I'll check that seal. I'll check that seal at least twice a season, maybe even more. I'll check it and they don't even know I've checked it.
Okay. So Ash, if I was going to build an engine like you are for truck racing, how long or how many seasons would I expect to get before I'd have to either pull it down or rebuild it?
Well, I think some of the C12 Caterpillar guys, they run into head gasket problems maybe once a season, but they might pull the head off once a season maybe to do that. But I do know one of the Cat engines that did about 6 or 7 seasons, and then they pulled it down just to inspect it. They'd done head gaskets and stuff on it over the years, but they pulled it down to inspect it and actually found the inside of the engine was actually perfectly fine. And I think most of the second-hand parts went straight back into it, and it's still out there now racing. So The newer electronic engines, that's one of the reasons why I want to go down that road, is they're just so much more reliable.
Yeah.
Like, they just keep going and going. You don't have to do too much in the way of extra maintenance or rebuilds and that sort of thing. But like my old engine, I'd lucky to get one meeting out of it sometimes, and it'd blow up. We'd go all the way to Timaru, do about 5 laps and blow the thing to bits, and go back to Wellington, rebuild it, go back to Auckland and do another 5 or 6 laps and blow it to bits. But previous to that, when we weren't trying to push it to its extremities, that engine would do 4 or 5 seasons sometimes without having to be pulled apart. Like the engine now, I think, that Mark King's got it after Pricey had it. I think I put a piston and liner in it for Pricey at one point 2 years ago, and Pricey snapped the crankshaft in it, but that same engine got a second-hand crankshaft put in it, and it's got the same cylinder head still on it. They never got pulled off, and it's still got the same pistons, liners, and all that sort of stuff in it. And it's just at the point where we want to keep it reliable, to keep the guy out there, keeping him having fun. And it's an engine you can't really push any further than what it is now. Otherwise, it just starts failing and falling apart. So, but that probably would be one of the higher maintenance engines out there. And Mark's already had a good full season out of it without touching it. So, like, it's the sort of thing, like, you can throw money at them and rebuild them all the time, but that thing doesn't really give too many dramas now. It might do a piston and liner once every couple of years, but we'll just come across that when it happens.
Very cool. And I suppose it's the more horsepower you pump into them, the more unreliable they become, isn't it? It's really the key thing.
Oh, definitely. And I think even a couple of the guys out there now are sort of pushing that 2,000 horsepower, maybe even more, I think. And haven't had too many dramas. I think Shane Gray's truck's sort of in excess of 2,000 horsepower easily, and I think they ran into a little bit of a problem at Pukekohe there with an injector or a fuel issue, but as far as I know, they haven't actually had to do too much engine work to that. They haven't pulled it apart, they haven't wrecked it, and I think that's one of the reasons why Shane went down that road with that engine too. Like, he had the Cummins engine years ago as well, and it used to blow to bits just like my one. And I think after about probably 20 rebuilds for those guys, they gave up on the idea of it wasn't fun anymore when you're out there at midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, rebuilding motors just to go racing again the next day. So, yeah, it's sort of the horsepower's there now, and the reliability's there too, which is what everyone's sort of looking for. Like, it's one thing to have horsepower, but you've got to finish your races and finish the meetings to actually get anywhere in life. So that's the big thing, the reliability now.
Daniel, were you going to say something, or we interrupted you?
I just remember that you touched on effectively what we call a technical protest. So if someone decides, hey, look, this other guy's got a bigger engine than what he's saying, there is a facility for that.
Yep.
It does cost the competitor money. They get that back if they're proven to be right. So it starts off with them filing a protest form, and that usually happens at the end of the season. Remember, these engines are sealed, so you can protest an engine, and that counts right back to when that seal was fitted.
Yep.
So it could be an entire season. It won't be the season before, but it could be the entire season. And then that will go to the clerk of the course. The clerk of the course will decide whether it needs to go any further, and then that might go to a steward's meeting, and then go to a court of appeal.
Why the clerk of the course? What's he got to do with the price of fish in China?
So he needs to know everything. Yeah. So he'll receive that protest form, and then he'll say to me, "Hey, we need to pull this engine to bits." So he's the boss.
Based off what though? Based like, is he mechanically minded? Does he have the technical expertise to make that decision? I suppose is the question I was asking.
No, so he'll ask me. I mean, he'll talk to me and say, is there a chance this engine could be a different size? And of course, I'm going to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'll say, look, we need to strip this down. There is a time where I may decide that I want to strip them down. And, there was enough, you sort of get the feel of what's going on in the camp. And I was actually leaning towards stripping these engines down. Now we're only interested in the Class B engines, of course, because the Class A engines
doesn't matter.
They can do what they like.
Yeah.
But anyway, what transpires is if they decide these engines have to be stripped down, the cost is incurred by the person making the protest.
Yeah.
Okay, and if they are found, um, the engine's found to be legal, then usually that cost will be totally billed to the person that made the protest to start with.
It wouldn't be
If it's
cheap either, I wouldn't imagine.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, what's a head gasket for a C12 worth? Like the gasket by itself is $1,100, I think.
Is that right, Ash? You'd know. Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah, they're up there, all right. Yeah, and
Yeah.
some of the guys, even if they're trying to do custom head gaskets, could be even higher.
Do you
Yeah.
get many of them though, Daniel? Like, do you get many people that protest? Is it a regular thing in the sport?
Okay, so now that the particular engine that we were talking about from a few years ago, that got protested, um, everybody's seen how that system works, and how sort of awkward and costly it can be. Uh, all the drivers out there, all the competitors out there, pretty much that have a B class engine have offered it up for measurement and want to get it sealed before any of this happens.
Okay,
They just don't want to go through all that.
makes sense, doesn't it?
And that's the best way. That's the best way.
Yeah, we do that at Speedway too. We seal engines as well for obvious reasons, unless it's a class that doesn't require it. Let's have a talk about. I talked before about getting around that track as fast as you can, and obviously getting around the corners as fast as you can. And a lot of the elements that you need to get things around corners pretty quickly is a thing called tyres. So Ash, I'll ask you this question. Do you need special tyres to go track racing? And I want to elaborate more on that. Is there any particular brand, like are you locked into a particular brand? And do you have wets? So there's a few questions there you can sort of mould into your answer.
Yeah, well, no, there's no wets whatsoever. So if it rains, you're stuck with what you've got, sort of thing. But there is a couple of race tyres out there. Goodyear tyres. Everyone would have heard of Goodyear's. They make a tyre specifically for truck racing. There used to be Continental that made race tyres, and they're actually a really good tyre, but for whatever reason they stopped making them. But there is Goodyear, and there is GT Radials. They make a race tyre as well, which the pattern of the tyre is very similar to the Goodyear tyre. And I don't know, there's guys out there running either tyre, and they've both got similar feedbacks, and I don't think one tyre's any better than the other.
Mm-hmm.
I think the tyres that we get in New Zealand, they're all the same compound, I believe, and stuff like that. So I don't think you can get a couple of different compounds in the Goodyear, I think. But I think all the ones in New Zealand that end up out here, everyone's stuck with the same sort of compound. So yeah, there is a couple of tyres, and they are a specific race tyre. So
Are they a particular Giro as well, Ash? Do they Giro a particular rating, or like, is it just when you say it's a particular truck racing tyre, what makes it unique to truck racing?
Like the compound and stuff like that. It's Goodyear specifically make it for truck racing. I don't think it's got a rating for road rating or anything like that. So you couldn't go put it on your road truck and go down the road, sort of thing. It wouldn't be legal. It's a specific truck racing only tyre. And it's mainly down to the compound and the tread type on it. There's no real tread to them. There's just a couple of lines right around the centre and the outside edges of the tyre, sort of thing.
So how long do they last? Do they last a meeting or a couple of meetings?
Like I know with Pricey's old truck, he used to put 2 brand new tyres on the front axle for qualifying every round. So he'd just do it religiously, and then he'd keep the good second-hand tyres to put on the rear. And yeah, like I know the rear axle on them, unless you're out there sort of sliding the back end of the truck around and doing skids and stuff like that, the back tyres last a couple of seasons actually.
Oh.
And the front tyres, you can get a good whole meeting easily out of a set of front tyres. You'll even get two meetings out of a set of front tyres easily if you look after them and you're not doing silly things with them. But yeah, they sort of, once they go through so many heat cycles, the tyres actually do start to harden up and they become a lot less usable or user friendly to race on. So you can keep using second-hand tyres, but to be out the front, those front guys will be putting new tyres on every second day.
Interesting. Right, let's get into some questions we've had that have come through. Wayne Stewart asks, and we'll ask you, Ash, because it's a technical question, so to speak. Is there an age limit on what model race truck's based on? I suppose Daniel can answer.
No. any age of race truck or any age of truck can be turned into a race truck. Yeah, there's no age limit on how old the race truck can be. I think there's a couple of KM Bedfords out there that are probably in their 70s kind of thing, 70s era of vehicle, and yeah, they're still out there racing. So no, there's no age limit on the vehicle as such, as long as it meets the criteria of a Class A truck or a like a 2-axle tractor unit sort of thing within the rules. Yeah, any age can fit.
Tell me, Daniel, the classes of trucks. Now, obviously, there's more than one. So we've talked about Class A, Class B. What else is there? How many more other classes of trucks are there?
There is a Class C, which I haven't had to be that familiar with because there are none.
That's easy.
I don't see them running. But from memory, I think they're allowed 3.5 ton is the minimum weight, and the engine size is 7.5 litre.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they call them, is it SBRs? SBR, I think was the main. I think that was the main truck that entered these things, which are is it a Mitsubishi or a Fuso?
Isuzu, I think. Yeah.
Isuzu, sorry, Isuzu. That's it. Yep, Isuzu SBR. But yeah, other than that, it's it's the 5-ton Class B trucks with the engines up to just below 12 litre, and then over that being the 5.5-ton Class A trucks.
And what's the maximum engine capacity they can have?
They can do whatever they like, pretty much. I mean, really, the likes of Shane and Malcolm are probably both at the maximum horsepower anybody could ever want.
Yeah.
And I think Shane actually ran detuned for most of the season, not because the engine wasn't there for it, but the fact that he didn't really need it because it probably didn't give him any more lap time. And I think it was just to make sure things like driveline, the transmission, etc., was going to be reliable.
If you took the governors off them, what sort of top speeds would we be able to see out of some of these trucks?
So what actually happens is the amount of air that's hitting the huge frontal area of these trucks is enough to overcome the amount of friction the rear tyres have.
Oh, yeah.
They get up to about 230, 240 kilometres an hour, and then the rear wheels just start skidding.
Okay. Interesting. Righto, more questions. Charlie Zammit says hello from Australia. What else we got? So can we ask Ash, this comes from Justine Marie, can we ask Ash when he's finally going to put a ring on his lovely girlfriend's finger?
When the race truck's finished.
Oh, geez, you're up to that
now. Daniel, what do you think about bringing back the SBR trucks that comes from Peyton Kempton?
The way the rules are written at the moment, I actually think Class C is the way to go, but nobody agrees with me. I don't think you'd build an SBR, but there are plenty of other trucks that fall into that weight category that are out there today. And even this 7.5 litre engine cap is something that a rule that was made in probably the 90s. And you can YouTube plenty of engines that are 7 litre that have got 1,000, 1,500, maybe even more horsepower. So you get a truck with 1,500 horsepower that weighs 3.5 tons. I think they'd be fairly quick around a track, albeit they do have some other restrictions like wheel and tyre combinations from memory, and then that leads into problems with brakes. So that's going to slow them down too. If anybody went out that way and started beating all the super trucks, then you can be damn sure the rules would get changed pretty quickly. Just putting that out there.
Yep, just quietly we'll put that out there. Would Mark look at going to an electronic engine in your old truck? Who's Mark?
This is a question for Ash.
Yeah, I think like anything, if his budget entails him to be allowed to do stuff like that, I think his next step probably would be to put an electronic engine in that truck, or he's already seems to be reasonably hooked and stuck with the bug of truck racing. So maybe if he could pass that truck on to somebody else later on and look at building himself a brand new one, or an easier step would be to relinquish that engine and take it out of circulation at some point and you put an electronic engine in there. The technology is getting a lot easier to come across to make the electronic engines run as good as they can. So I think, yes, it might do another season or so, but I think his next step possibly would be to look at doing that. And he could do a lot of work with that truck if he really wants to carry on with that sort of truck. If he likes the look of it, he can do a lot with it. So I think an electronic engine will be at some point on the cards for him later down the track, yeah.
I heard you're buying a Tesla truck, Ash.
Well, that might be something Daniel could weigh in on at some point. I think in the rules they might have to allow for electric at some point. I think we're going to run out of diesel at some point in life. Not so much the world's going to run out. I think the governments are going to stop us from using it.
Daniel doesn't agree. Daniel, wow. Are they, though? Let's be honest. I think there's a little bit more to that. We won't get into that subject tonight because we could be here for quite some time. It gets very political and very nasty. We're all in the motorsports, mate, the whole lot of us, and we know what the story is. There's more bloody shit being used to dig up to electric cars than there's anything would ever be for any diesel or anything like that.
They can actually make diesel out of fresh air now. I'm not even kidding.
Well, there you go. We had somebody said actually for you, Ash, you did a good job of the commentary of that last thing at Pukekohe. So that come from Charlie Zammit. He just said you've done a great job, mate. So I'll just pass that on to you.
Thank you, Charlie.
Okay, so this comes from Rangy Rivers. Hi, Daniel. I hear there is a new team coming on board next year. Jeff Johns in the number 60 truck. What are you expecting to find wrong with that truck? Here we go. Here we go. Nothing. Yeah,
Nothing.
Nice. Just easy. Want to elaborate, or are you just quite happy to say nothing?
Oh, well, no. I mean, he's going to be signing an entry form which says there's nothing wrong with his truck. So why would I expect to find something?
There you go.
These guys will build and prepare their trucks with schedule TR, that's their technical schedule, wide open on the bench. And whenever they want to change something on the truck or adjust something or make something or whatever, they'll go to the book first and make sure it fits within those rules or within their interpretation of the rule. That's a key thing, by the way.
Interpretation is a great thing, isn't it? We'll move on. What do we got here? Sorry, guys, because it keeps rolling through when I'm just about to ask him. We talked about tyres before. Do you need special tyres? Now, with the different classes, do they have different sizes, or is it all the same tyre for every class? So, that come from Dean Botma.
I knew that question was coming up, so I was busy trying to bring up that rule because it has changed recently. That used to be 19-inch rims, I believe, but at the moment, the way it's written, and I can't see anything saying any different, they are allowed to run the same wheel and tyre as the Class A and B trucks. So that's the 315/70 22.5, and either the Jitty or the Goodyear race compounds.
Okay. Hope that answers your question. Grant Malloy asks, Ash, will you ever finish your truck?
Yeah, the plan is to get it finished, that's for sure.
Righto, we'll leave it at that. Jason Jenner asks, how many litres of diesel does the average truck use during a meeting? Well, let's start with a race and then a meeting. Ash.
Well, I think on average, I know my old truck, it would do per race somewhere between 20 to 30 litres per race. So you throw in qualifying and a few practices on the Friday and whatnot. I know, what would there be, Daniel? 3 practices on a Friday, 3 things on a Saturday, 3 things on a Sunday. So times 30 by 9, and somewhere in the vicinity of that is what you'd use per weekend, sort of thing. But it's roughly between 20 to 30 litres a race. I think everyone's sort of similar in literage across the board with most of the trucks. I don't think anyone's using 50 or 60 litres, and there's no one getting around there only doing 10 litres per race either. So you're in the vicinity of 20 to 30 a race.
It's probably gallons per mile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so lots, in other words. Grant Bailey maybe says, Grant, I'll make Ash finish his truck so I get my ring.
Good girl.
He's not saying anything, eh? He's going to hold that one back. We'll just.
Well, it may be a cheaper ring if the truck costs a bit more to finish.
Well, there we go. I think we just about covered all the questions that are everywhere and anywhere, and we've gone more than we thought we would, so which is awesome, guys. Is there anything, either of you, we'll start with you, Daniel, is there anything you want to add to this particular interview? Anything you want to get a message across, or anybody you'd like to thank, or anything at all that you want to add before we close up the interview?
Jeepers, I mean, I'd really like to thank my staff at work for bearing with me not being there, because I know what it's like as an employee when your boss is just away all the time, you know. He's always away, he's never there, and it can be a bit frustrating. But they plough through, and, you know, there was quite a number of years there where Justine was at home having to look after the kids and things, and wasn't able to come to these meetings regularly. And, you know, she looked after me and my interests back then. And I suppose the truck racing and motorsport in general is a bit of sanity for me, you know, just not being at work. Pretty full-on sort of workshop that I have. So
tell us about your business, just while you're talking about it. What is it? Where is it? What do you do?
I own a mechanics business in Dunedin.
Called?
Yeah. So it's a pit stop franchise.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So I've got the pit stop franchise. One of about 45 franchises around the country.
Mm-hmm.
Hillside Road, and I think we're one of the bigger ones, probably, you know, one of the top 10 ones in the country. And we're struggling with staff at the moment. You know, I'm really struggling for a senior mechanic. I'll pay for one if I can find one, but you just can't find them.
Yeah. I think everybody's in that boat, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
Anything else, Daniel? Sorry.
So yeah, what did you say, Jason, in regards to? It was obviously thanking a few people, but I mean, I'd like to thank the trucks for giving me the opportunity right at the start to take on such a sport, and it has become a passion for Justine and I and our family. You know, the entire fraternity. That's just such a good bunch of people, and you know, that sports. You know, we're travelling up and down the country every year in a bit of a circuit, and you know, all the guys see my children there. They've seen my children grow up at the local events where we've, you know, taken the caravan, you know, and it's all volunteer. You know, this is not a paid position; it's a volunteer position. So it's all on our own back. The sport pays for our travel in some form or another, but you know, the time definitely comes at a passion cost more than anything.
I think the sport appreciate you, though, Daniel. From what I understand, there's a lot of respect out there from all facets of the motorsport community. So, you know, I think on behalf of them, we thank you for sacrificing. You know, and motorsport, I'm sure everybody in this room and everybody watching will agree it's a sacrifice. There's no two ways about that. So we appreciate, and everybody appreciates what you do for the sport too, Daniel. Ash, I'll hand it over to you, mate. Is there anything you want to add and before we finish up?
Oh, just the fact that, yeah, I guess Daniel and his family have put a lot of their own time and effort into keeping the sport going. And some years ago, the sport was in pretty dire straits too, at one point where we only had a couple of rounds at Timaru and no other tracks wanted us. And the guys behind the scenes in the truck racing series for the last few years have actually done an amazing job of bringing more tracks back to us and allowing information to go to the tracks so we can race at them. And yeah, it's actually been, the guys behind the scenes have actually done an excellent job in the last few seasons. And the season just gone, we've had like Napa and Napa Auto Parts sponsoring the series, and like it's been a long time since we've got to that level of having major sponsorship and stuff like that going on. So like a credit to all the people that have been behind the scenes getting that organised and keeping the sport going, because it is a tough sport to keep going at sometimes, and especially the way the world's going at the moment with recessions and bits and pieces and stuff like that. They've done amazingly to really get the sport back up on its feet, and we're actually starting to promote it a lot more professionally. And with what you're doing, Jason, it keeps advertising and the public interested, and it actually does a lot to promote the sport for us as well. So I guess everyone that has been behind the scenes have done amazingly in the last few seasons to really get the sport up and going, and it's been really enjoyable to be involved in it, to give people the drive to want to come back, I guess, too.
But I mentioned that we got there's the Super Truck coordinator Karen Padden from Timaru, and she runs
Amazing.
probably the biggest truck meeting of the year. Would you agree, Ash? Timaru it's the one, isn't it? Like, it's massive. Everybody in that area.
Oh yes, I
It's
think I think now over the years, with only, I guess at that one point in time when there was only 2 rounds at Timaru, I think Timaru is the home of truck racing, and like without Timaru and Karen especially, like the sport would have almost been non-existent to this day if it wasn't for her and the effort she put in 10, 15 years ago to like, she never wanted to see the sport die, so she made sure that the trucks were allowed to race at Timaru, and she always had a meeting there every year, and we've had two meetings a year there some years, and she's done a lot back in the day too to get like the Trans-Tasman events happening there, and yeah, with Timaru is, I think, the home of truck racing for our series, that's for sure. And they've held, I think, one year in the early 2000s, they had a V8 round there with the race trucks, and there's photos in the Timaru club rooms. It was the biggest event they've ever had, and their truck rounds are normally one of the bigger events they have every year too. They put every bit of advertising and promotion into it, and yeah, they do an amazingly job to keep the trucks wanting to come back there every year, that's for sure.
Yeah, Karen's an amazing lady, right?
Who
Sorry.
knows?
Daniel, sorry about that. What was that?
I say, you know, we could have 10, 12 trucks there next year. You know, that's going to be in late January. If anyone's in the South Island, they want to go to a meeting, drive to Timaru. Doesn't matter where you are. It can't be more than 4 or 5 hours away. So.
Yep. Tell me, none of the dates have sort of come out for your next season yet, have they? So it's probably a bit early for that, isn't it?
Not officially, no.
Okay, well, we'll leave that one alone then. Well, boys, thank you very much for taking the time out of your evening to come and have a chat to me, Ash and Daniel, and I'm sure we've informed people with some really good information, some good knowledge there, and no doubt we'll try and catch up around the traps at some stage and have a beer and tell some lies and, bits and pieces. And once again, on behalf of everybody watching tonight, thanks very much, boys, for giving up some time.
Thanks for the facility.
Thank you.
Right, see you later.
Yes, thank you.
Right, I'll just close off and then I'll come and say bye personally. So just give us a couple of minutes, boys, and I'll be back with you in a minute. Okay, team, that's it. That is us. Thank you very much for joining us for our first one of the off-season, so to speak. Coming up in a couple of weeks' time, we're actually going to be doing something a little bit different. It's going to be Motorsport Talkback, a full Talkback facility has been installed in here. So if you want to join in the conversation, so to speak, you'll be able to ring up. We'll have guests on. You'll be able to ask questions of those guests. Just ring in and have a bit of a yarn. So it's the first of its kind. I mean, we see bits and pieces all over the place, but we never really see it about motorsport. So it's not just Speedway. We'll have topics from truck racing through to rallying, through to whatever, that sort of stuff. We'll have a topic of the day. You can just ring in or you can join us through a Zoom call or whatever and be a part of the conversation. So watch out for that. That will be coming up in about 2 weeks' time, 2.5 weeks' time actually. So yeah, look out for that. Thanks very much everybody for joining us tonight. I'm Jace. See you later.